Hello fellow Cappies. Today I want to make a video going a little more in depth on my thoughts of this game's HP inflation. Now I'm going to try and be as calm as possible so people don't think I'm trying to be aggressive, right? However, to be honest, the Kurobot infestation that this game has is pretty fucking bad, and this isn't anything like against Wuwa or attacking Wuwa. Trust me, if you were here during my channel when I was calling out HSR's HP inflation in early version 2, oh boy, I'd argue it was worse, right? This is simply something that comes with calling shit out like this, especially in more recent gacha games. People want to be hopeful of, oh, this is going to be the game that changes the space and kind of separates itself from the greedy. However, the reality is basically always that this is never the case, and this is just constantly reoccurring, right? So please don't take this as like me trying to hate on, Wuthering Waves, say it's going to EOS or anything. After all, I am an HSR player, and I am someone who actively enjoys HSR. So it's not even like I can really say this game is going to go EOS or I'm going to quit it because of its HP inflation, because that simply isn't true, right? So enough of that, just wanted to get that out of the way at the beginning so people don't think like I'm trying to be unfair. Trust me, I made way more HP inflation videos on HSR in the early days as compared to Wuwa. So let's just get straight into it. Wuwa, they added the recent 2 new TOA floors, and of course, as anyone could guess who was paying attention to the beta, this caused some sparks, people making videos about how much harder it is to clear for some of the older limiteds, and blah 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 blah, right? Basically, this is just straight up HP inflation, because it is part of the hazard tower. In Wuwa, it's almost always counted its HP inflation from an entire tower through graphs, and you haven't really looked at specific floors. So this does include the 2 older floors and the 2 newer floors for the hazard tower, making it have an over 100% HP inflation, and I'm pretty sure it's actually noticeably more than that. However, it's hard to really calculate it exactly because of the extra 30 seconds. However, I will say one thing for sure: the extra 30 seconds do not actually make up for the massive HP inflation that there is in these 2 new floors. So what I kind of want to talk about today, solo Donjin, right? One of the most common arguments used against me and a lot of people in this community whenever people rightfully called out the bad direction this game was going in with its endgame was basically solo Donjin. If Donjin can solo, I'll never believe in power creep. And we have now gotten to the point where both in Wuthering Waves and the hardest floors in TOA, you're not using solo Donjin, okay? It simply is impossible, and so solo Donjin simply isn't what she used to be. In fact, the best team I've seen people use against the newest floors that is completely free to play with 4 stars is main DPS Havoc Rover, and something that I've kind of realized is even with an entire team, they are still barely clearing with like 15 to 20 seconds left, and I know for sure that it took some of these people a lot of retries, right? So that goes to show you that the standard for being able to clear the hardest content in the game, at least when taking into account full free-to-play only including 4 stars, it has gone from solo Donjin to an entire Havoc Rover team. And even then, it's kind of cutting it close. So if they add HP inflation to these 2 new TOA floors, then I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to be cooked for most, if not all, the 4-star free-to-play teams that this game currently has to offer, right? Now, this as well ties back to another issue that Wuwa has, once again similar to HSR. It just hasn't been releasing new 4 stars at all. I believe Buling, if she does release in 2.8, should be like almost a year later. So It's pretty bad right now for 4 stars in Wua. However, we'll see how Buling ends up being. Maybe she changes everything, right? However, this is where I kind of want to bring up HSR so I can use it as a reference, since one, most of my, channel viewers know about HSR, and two, HSR is very, very looked at negatively in the gacha space because of its HP inflation and power creep. In fact, a lot of the biggest WUA creators currently, that's basically their number one critique of why they quit HSR, is because of its HP inflation, and this game is basically going down the exact same route as HSR, right? For those who don't know, when comparing time periods, current 2.6 WUA is comparable to HSR in, I believe, 2.3, 2.4, right? So this also is around the same time, right before actually, where we got massive HP inflation in MOC that led to a lot of people talking about it and seeing HSR in a negative light. However, the thing is, even HSR's like worst HP inflation patch, I believe, was like 80%, while with these new TOA floors, it is vastly above that. And the exact same thing goes for Whimpering Waste. The Whimpering Waste HP inflation is basically even worse than anything HSR has ever done. So this game has actually gotten HSR levels of HP inflation faster than HSR itself. However, it's not only that, there's also the fact that this game has reached HSR's level of signature jumps, current HSR, a year earlier, which is another thing that is pretty worrying. So this game is basically trying to speedrun being HSR, which is not a good thing, right? I don't think anyone can really deny how bad of a look it is when you go from solo donjon can clear to entire free-to-play team can barely clear against the new floors. It really just isn't a good look. Now, of course, is this really all that realistic? Obviously not, right? Most people are going to have a few limiteds to work with to be able to clear endgame content. However, this is the next part of the conversation I want to get into. For my WUA viewers who don't play HSR, it became basically near impossible to clear with free-to-play only teams in MOC, I believe in 3.1 of HSR, right? 3.0 and earlier, I do believe you could run full 4-star free-to-play teams and clear the endgame content. So this means that, well, WUA is gonna have to be able to allow you to clear with full 4-star team against the hardest TOA floors for about the next 4 to 5 patches to match the level of HSR's HP inflation. Now, once again, maybe Buling can shake things up and change the free-to-play teams, allowing it to be a lot stronger. However, if Buling really doesn't shake things up, then it's quite likely that WUA just does have HSR levels of HP inflation. Now, don't confuse HP inflation with power creep. WUA does not have power creep levels of HSR levels of power creep. They have HSR levels of HP inflation. They simply do the HP inflation in a much more scummy way. Even outside of the massive HP inflation in the current TOA floors, the requirements for the amount of characters you need to clear endgame is actually like noticeably higher in WUA as compared to HSR. You can make the argument that you can just use throwaway characters on the side towers. I wouldn't disagree. However, you get the point. What WUA will like to do most of the time is kind of horizontally invest the HP inflation, and because it has like this stamina system, it just gets really wonky and it's making you want to use multiple teams. And this is where WUA is kind of coming in its own predatory practices. HSR doesn't really have this alongside this. if you vertically invest into a team in an HSR and they clear very well, you save more time for your other team to clear, which is a big reason why free-to-play teams were able to clear so well in HSR for a long time. You could use like the strongest free-to-play team, and then your second team would have like 6-7 cycles to work with, making it just much more doable. WUA unfortunately doesn't have this benefit. I mean, they do have it in Whimpering Wastes, but they don't have it in TOA. You could clear within like 20-30 seconds with Augusta. That's like highly vertically invested in, but you're not going to save any time for your other team that's going to go in, and if they're way weaker, well, maybe you'll struggle, right? So that's kind of all I wanted to go over real quick. Once again, this isn't to like say WUA EOS or anything. This is simply to just talk about this shit openly so that more people can be aware of it. This game really does have HSR levels of HP inflation, and even the like teams needed for clearing the hardest endgame content, it's now getting really close. Like WUA is cutting it really close with these new TOA floors for 4-star only like team clearing, right? And so I do have to say, simply be wary if you're one of those people out there who are trying to like blindly defend Kuro. At the end of the day, a lot of people are going to be like this. However, I simply want people to like kind of see the light and not be completely blinded by like gacha war or gacha tribalism, and just be able to recognize when something is becoming an issue, and it's becoming a very big issue way quicker than we thought. I mean, literally right before we got the Whimpering Waste HP inflation, I would have told someone, and many would have told people, that Gion is still an amazing pull these days. However, the pull value opinion of Gion legit changed within a single patch because of the HP inflation increase. And once again, you cannot expect a game, especially these gacha games, to suddenly stagnate the HP inflation, right? This is something that never happens in these games. I guarantee you, a year down the line, when WUA is about as old as HSR, it's going to look a lot worse. You're not going to be able to clear with 4-star only teams in the end game, and you're probably going to need a few limiteds, right? Love you all. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Once again, I still think this game's endgame is pissy easy to clear. However, I also think HSR's endgame is pissy easy to clear in the same way. Simply want to talk about the HP inflation. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.